This update for September 23, 2023, day 577 of the war, end of the date update. Also update catch up for September 22. I'm going to start with macroeconomic update, and then we're going to switch to the situation on battlefield in Ukraine, and just generally going to do as always some strategic updates, but they are fairly short. As it's weekend, there's not that many news. So first, just wanna look what's going on over the week in the world of economic world. So if we look at first start with France, as you can see, France is going deeper into recession. It's sort of catching up to Germany, not quite there, but the direction is very clear, and the important part is that both engines are broken, manufacturing and services. Then now let's switch to overall European Union. So you can see inflation is barely going down. This is after many interest rate increases by European Central Bank, and it looks like there will be some more. ECB may catch up eventually to the U.S. Federal Reserve or U.S. Central Bank. Let's actually quickly look what's going on in the U.S. In the U.S., job market remains strong, as you can see from the numbers, and more importantly, if you look at the initial jobless claims, then continuing, they're actually going down, which also means that job market quickly absorbs everyone who is getting laid off. I'm not saying literally everyone, but basically it's still fairly easy to find a job in the US looking at these numbers. At the same time, Fed manufacturing index is not that positive. As you can see, manufacturing is totally tanked in the Philly Fed area. Then also the only sort of bright spot is capex, so basically investment in the machinery to produce products in the future. So this is, as you can see, this is a total switch into positive. So this probably meaning that there is optimism among the basically business owners. Then also employment remains negative, no real meaningful move in any direction. Then also new orders is sharp change to negative, which is obviously also very negative. And then also prices paid, they went up, which also means inflation. So the basically the picture looks pretty gloomy, at least based on these numbers, right? This is just only one isolated area in the US, not the biggest one at all, but it paints a picture of, let's say, relatively high unemployment and high inflation, and obviously not much of manufacturing output. We'll see if this is what's going to transpire in the U.S. over, let's say, next 6 to 9 months. But definitely, this information is not positive. Then, if you look in the U.S. in terms of services situation, it's tilting closer and closer into inflationary zone, as you can see, from 5.5 to 5.2. So, and services in the US are about 70% of the economy. So it's really important part. It's the main engine. Manufacturing is really just I don't remember, if like roughly 15%. So this is definitely not the main driver. Although there is, as you can see, there is some rebound there. So it's a little bit. There is a positive move there. Let's look at what's going on in Germany. There is not really much change. Manufacturing remains down. There is little bounce, but it's essentially not meaningful. There is some pickup in services, but for Germany, manufacturing is really the driver, is the source of wealth, and that's the most important part. And it remains in deep, I would say, depression. Now let's check what's going on in the UK. Things here somewhat similar to Europe, where inflation is still high and actually higher than Europe, as you can see, although it dropping faster than Europe. We'll see if this trend remains or this is just a blip. Then, as you can see, retail sales are tanking. This is outright negative because this is pound sterling value, or basically monetary value, which usually if there is inflation, so it still goes up even just from the nominal perspective. However, the fact that it goes down, it also means that there is severe shrinkage in terms of actual physical goods that people buy. This is definitely, basically camouflaged, and the negativity of this number is definitely camouflaged. And then if we look at manufacturing in the UK, it's there is a bounce. It's unclear if this has changed over trend, but it's still in deep recessionary territory, and also services are going also in the same direction. So definitely UK is sinking into recession, deeper, similar to Germany and France. Also, let's look quickly what's going on in Japan. The numbers there is also not great. As you can see, export is down, import down even faster. At the same time, trade balance is negative, which also means that Japanese business model is broken. And the model is similar to China, similar to South Korea, where it's export-oriented manufacturing, essentially. Where high value added, they definitely higher on the value chain than, let's say, China or South Korea, but still it doesn't sort of insulate them from negative effects of let's say disintegrating global economy. So there are more problems coming from that. That really means that Japan will not be able to finance U.S. Budget deficit or trade deficits. They are basically essentially part of the same. But basically, Japan will not be able. It will be forced basically to sell its treasury holdings because of its negative trade balance. And also, inflation in Japan remains fairly high for Japan. Usually it's deflation there, as you can see. It's well above 2% target. So this is quite significant for Japan. So things definitely not looking good in Japan. Now let's switch to them closer to the front line, to Ukraine. I'm going to start with Russia. I mentioned about the problems with the gasoline and diesel fuel on inside of Russia, where there were shortages. So as a result of actions of the Russian government, prices quickly dropped, like about 10%. There is more availability. So as expected, this short-term, it's purely short-term solution at the expense of the future. But it did work temporarily, and at the same time, Russian refining capacity owners are sort of completely against, complaining about it. But I would say strong fist of the Russian government forces them to do what the government needs, and to the point that they are not allowed to reduce their refining throughput. So basically, so you understand, the natural reaction would be from manufacturer who is forced to sell lower than they want to, they just stop producing or reducing production. So Russian government fully aware of that, and they basically force them to kind of have a quota, how much they need to produce, a minimum quota that needs to be produced. And there is a meeting every week with all of these producers to review if they're sticking to it and so on. And looks like this measure is going to be indefinite until as long as the war continues, essentially. The problem is that eventually this may work for some time, but eventually uh, um, Russian producers will simply underinvest, and there will be just basically stoppages due to the poor maintenance, and that's where it all is going to go, and that will create quite significant problems in general for the Russian market as well, and they're not going to be quickly fixable at that point. So basically, Russian government is digging deeper grave for itself in terms of down the road, no exact timing, but significant fuel crisis in Russia that cannot be resolved because simply everything was run into the ground. Um, but for now, it works. And going back to this whole situation, why this is happening, it's very simple. Is manufacturers in Russia, they want to sell at higher international prices, and prices inside of Russia are lower, obviously, than international prices, and so there's no incentive there, and so the real proper answer is to increase prices for refined products inside of Russia to the level that's the same as on international market. This is the same idea that I mentioned before. This is one big, um, say, I would say, one big barrel of oil that is sort of collective by its nature, and everybody takes from that barrel, and it's not just isolated to one country or another. It's a global commodity, and that's sort of strengths of it, and at the same time it's a weakness of it. And so if government uses this tyrannical methods to run everything, or basically communist collectivist methods, eventually it will create two shortages and basically malinvestment, or sorry, underinvestment in the production facility, in basically in the production of it. Now let's switch to the situation on actually battlefield in Ukraine. I'm gonna do it in a clockwise fashion, as I always do, starting from very north. The situation along the state border, it remains the same. Now let's jump to the North Lugansk front lines. Things here are quiet. No essential changes, no major Russian attacks, and obviously Ukraine. From Ukrainian perspective, this is sort of area of low strategic importance, basically. Now let's move to the North Donbass front lines. Things here are on the northern sector quiet. In the southern, there are some Russian counterattacks. I assume this being done by 31st Airborne Brigade and Force, and apparently they got some reinforcements, because I mentioned before that 72nd was severely damaged, and 31st also got some damage, some losses. So nevertheless, Russian troops there is a clear sign that they managed to recover from those losses, and they attempting to counterattack. Ukrainian forces at this moment sort of consolidating gains, regrouping, preparing for the next moves. But the way it looks strategically so far, it's not going anywhere. It just squeeze in one World War One type of style. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. Things here also remain more or less the same. It's actually fairly quiet. As you can see, there is not even much going on around Avdiivka. There is only Russian attacks, again, tactical attacks. Again, the same idea, painful squeeze of Ukrainian troops. That's expensive and resource-wise and human lives-wise for Russia. That doesn't go anywhere so far. Now let's move to Zaporizhya front line. Things here are more or less the same. There is some, pressure by Ukrainian troops, and there is very limited small success. Basically, section of trenches was taken, or let's say they moved forward 500 meters, which is basically essentially no change, nothing of this is nothing strategic, right? There is some uh, you know propaganda rumors, or this is a breach, decisive breach of the Russian defenses. This is nothing of that is true. Yes, there are successes, but they purely tactical. There is nothing. It's not decisive breach of any Russian defenses. And as I said before, to do that, that's not going to happen the way it's done. Basically, it's the because that's not what Ukrainian troops are doing. This is not offensive. This is just squeezes, and they will never lead to decisive breach of Russian defenses unless Russian troops are gonna get really thinned out. There's so far no indication of that. They're moving towards it, but there's no sort of perfect visibility in terms of reinforcements. So very hard to predict. But so far, there's no clear evidence that they are on any kind of verge of collapse, and there's still expectation that Russian political top will do mobilization. But so far, they claim that they managed to recruit enough volunteers or soldiers. They all obviously paid for money, but so far they claim that that's enough and everything is going well. We'll see if that's true. I have my doubts, but at the same time, the reality is such that that so far the defenses are holding on. And then the last section of the front line is along Dnipro River. Things here remain the same, quiet, no any sort of changes there. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.